How's it going, everyone? This is the George here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Shazam: Fury of the Gods. I just got back from seeing the newest film in the DCEU. This is the sequel to the 2019 film, and this is also the first DCEU film to come out after James Gunn became president of DC Films, and is also a film that may or may not connect to the new DC universe. We don't really know yet. We'll get more into that a bit later. But yeah, this film once again stars Zachary Levi as Shazam and Asher Angel as Billy Batson. And in this film, the Shazam family is still working together, but they're starting to grow distant. Billy Batson's trying to keep the family together. And while this is happening, the daughters of Atlas, played by Helen Mirren, Lucy Liu, and Rachel Zegler, are trying to take their powers back. And this film was once again directed by David F. Sandberg, who directed the first film. And if you saw my review for the recent Shazam film, you would all know that I love that film. I found it to be very unique. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a nice change of pace for superhero films, not just the DCEU. And with this film, they definitely go bigger than the previous film, even though the runtime's around the same. They definitely step it up with the special effects. I thought the special effects in this film looked great. Definitely better than some of the effects work in some of the recent MCU films. The action, I thought the action was a lot better this time than the previous film. But I noticed that while they did go bigger with this film, it kind of took some of the heart and uniqueness that the first film had away. Like, this film still has heart. There's still some heartfelt moments. Obviously, the family's starting to grow distant. And Billy Batson, you definitely see a character change with him. He went from, the first half of the first Shazam film, not really caring until like the second half of the film, to basically wanting to keep this family together and not wanting to go separate ways. So I love that change with his character. He's obviously still not used to the idea of calling his foster parents like mom or dad yet, but he's still cares very much for his siblings, his foster siblings. I will say there's more Shazam than Billy Batson in this film, even though Ashner Angel did a great job. On one hand, that shows that they are doing more action in this film, but at the same time, it kind of takes away from the Billy Batson aspect of this film. Zachary Levi's still very good as Shazam. I think he improved a bit more in this film than the previous film. The other kids still did very good as well with their roles. I still like this family dynamic, even though it's not as prominent as it was in the previous film. Like, I know this movie's gotten a mixed response, and yeah, it's not as good in my opinion as the first Shazam film, but this is also not a Wonder Woman 1984 scenario. This film still manages to keep a lot of that charm and fun that the first Shazam film had. With Wonder Woman 1984, like, it felt like a completely different movie from the first Wonder Woman film, even though it was directed by Patty Jenkins. But it also felt like they had more action in this first Shazam film. Like I said, they did improve on the action. They had more action sequences. Where Wonder Woman 1984, it felt like they had more exposition than action. As far as the villains go, I Helen Mirren wasn't as corny as she looked in the trailers. I thought she was fine. It felt like the one that was probably the corniest might have been Lucy Liu. Like, she still did a fine job, but there were times where it felt like she was the most over the top of the three sisters. Rachel Zegler to me had the best performance of the three sisters. I thought she gave the best performance, which is funny because she's also the youngest. She's not as experienced as Lucy Liu and Helen Mirren. But Helen Mirren, I thought, was pretty good in the role, and they honestly went in a direction with the sisters, or at least like Lucy Liu's character and Helen Mirren's character that I wasn't expecting. This film does, like I said, falls into that more generic comic book side of things, which doesn't make it a bad movie, but it doesn't make it as good as the previous film. There are ways that this film does pay respect and homage to other DCEU movies. Like, there are moments where I'm like, that reminds me of this DCEU film, and this reminds me of that DCEU film, which is kind of ironic because a lot of people don't like the Shazam movies because they're completely different from the early DCEU films in tone, but yet they're probably the films post Snyderverse that pay the most respect to those Snyderverse films. And speaking of Snyderverse, you have Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. appearing briefly in this film. It was already in the trailer, so not big spoilers. It's nice to see her again. Nice to hear that soundtrack. The soundtrack in this film is also better than the previous film. I will say that. But yeah, the Daughters of Atlas. They were fine, but they aren't as iconic as Savannah. I thought Savannah was a very underrated villain. I felt like his motivations and his backstory were captured a lot better. Like I said, the special effects work is great in this film. The mythical creatures look great. The dragon looks great. Like what kind of annoys me about this film, even though I liked it a lot, was they improved the film in many ways, but also took some steps back. And while I think it's a lot better than what the critics are saying, this film had the potential to be better than the first Shazam film, and it felt like it wasn't as good as it probably could have been. But having said that, I did enjoy this film a lot. I thought the action was a lot better. It was nice to see, references to other DC movies. Um, Zachary Levi is great once again as Shazam. The sisters were fine. They went in directions with the sisters that I actually wasn't expecting them to go. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Rachel Zegler was the standout of the three sisters, though, and I don't want to give too much about this film. I do want to do a spoiler stream maybe next week to go more into detail about this film. But the big question is with this movie, will it tie into what James Gunn wants to do? So if you recall back in January, James Gunn said like he hopes to retain certain people. Zachary Levi was one of those people. He also brought up how like the four DC movies are coming out this year are key to the DCU, not the DCEU anymore. It's the DCU. But David F. Sandberg has says it's based on the success of this film, how well this movie can do with not just critics but box office. And so far, it's not looking that great. I mean, the audiences seem to enjoy this film, and the reviews aren't terrible. Like this isn't like Black Adam bad or Batman versus Superman bad. It's more like around the Man of Steel mix, like divisive side of things. But the box office isn't looking too good so far. So I will say with how the film ends, even though like the post credit scene does set up like potential stories with Shazam, the way the film ended though for the most part, it felt like the door is open obviously for more, but if this was the end, I think it fits, but it could have been better for an ending. It's just a shame that with these Shazam movies, because I do think these are underrated DC movies, that they come out at weird times. They come out at times where there's other movies that are out that take away from the box office. And this film was not marketed well. I mean, I enjoyed the trailers, but the marketing for this film was kind of non-existent. I get it, DC and Warner Brothers wants to put a lot of effort into The Flash because that had a higher budget. That's the film that they think is amazing. And obviously you want all your box office money to go into there, but don't sacrifice these other DC movies for the sake of just one film. And hopefully I would like to see the Shazam movies continue into the new DC universe. But if they don't, I think the way this film ended, I think is an ending that, like I said, could have been better, but I think is fitting. But overall, I had a very good time with this film. It's a lot better than Black Adam, in my opinion. A lot better than Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumanium. I think it's better than some of the films that we've gotten from the MCU post Endgame. So overall, I'm gonna give Shazam: Fury of the Gods a B plus. I recommend you check it out. It's enjoyable. It still has some of the things that you like about the first film, but certain heartfelt moments, while they're still there, not as many as the first film. The first film I felt like was more emotional. One thing I will say about this film is that if you remember the boardroom scene from the first Shazam film, where the seven deadly sins are killing the board members and Savannah's father, there are moments in this film that remind me of that. So there is a bit of an inconsistent tone. Like, some moments it feels like a family-friendly superhero film, but then it goes a bit dark. But I enjoyed when they had those enjoyable moments and those dark moments. But yeah, like I said, I'm gonna give Shazam: Fury of the Gods a B plus. If you like the first film, I think you're gonna like this film. And I know there's some people that do think this film is better than the first film. So it kind of feels interchangeable for some people. They might prefer this film, they might prefer the previous film. But yeah, I will also say I even enjoyed this film more than Aquaman and Birds of Prey, which got better reviews. But at this point, do we really care about what the critics say? I mean, I know I'm doing this review. I'm like a YouTube movie critic, a small YouTube critic. But from what some of the reviews did sound like, I can tell some people are getting exhausted of comic book movies, and that's understandable because of how generic this film does feel. But what are your thoughts on Shazam: Fury of the Gods? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Which one did you prefer more, the first Shazam or Shazam: Fury of the Gods? Let me know in the comments down below. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe already if you haven't. Please share this with someone that likes DC movies that wants to see Shazam: Fury of the Gods. And I hope to see you guys real soon. Take care, everyone.